The wind howled against the rattling windows of a worn-down apartment building on the outskirts of the city. Inside, the air smelled faintly of instant noodles and damp laundry. David, a 32-year-old single father, sat at a small kitchen table with his 8-year-old son, Ethan. The boy's laughter was soft but bright as he proudly showed his father a drawing of a house. One with a garden, a swing, and sunlight pouring through wide, open windows. David smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. He had promised Ethan that one day they'd have a real home. But promises were hard to keep when you worked 2 jobs, barely earning enough for rent and groceries. The old radiator groaned and clanked, struggling to keep the place warm. David pulled his son's thin blanket tighter around him. Just as he was about to tell Ethan a bedtime story, a knock echoed through the hallway. Sharp, urgent, and out of place in that hour of night. David frowned, instinctively protective. Strangers never came here. When he opened the door, he found a girl, no older than 20, shivering in the biting wind. Her coat was far too light for the weather, her hair tangled by the rain. Her eyes, large and frightened, darted around as if she didn't belong to this world. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just need somewhere to stay, just for tonight." David hesitated. He had nothing, not even enough space. But behind him, Ethan tugged his sleeve, whispering, "Dade, she looks really cold." And so, against every instinct, he stepped aside. "Come in." That one act of kindness would change everything. The girl introduced herself as Clara. She sat by the flickering light of the stove, hands wrapped around a mug of tea David had offered. She was quiet, almost too quiet, as though her words had been stolen by fear. David wanted to ask questions. Why she was out there alone, where her family was. But he stopped himself. He had been judged too many times in his life to pass judgment on her. He only said, "You can sleep on the couch. It's not much, but it's warm." That night, David lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Why had he let her in? He barely knew her. And yet, when he glanced toward the living room and saw her curled up under an extra blanket, something in him softened. He remembered the countless nights when he and Ethan had nowhere to go, when kindness from strangers had been the only thing keeping them afloat. Morning brought small surprises. Clara helped Ethan tie his shoelaces, smiling as he chattered about school. She washed the dishes without being asked. She laughed when the radiator clanged loudly, saying it sounded like an old man grumbling. Still, David could sense something heavy behind her smile. Her eyes often wandered to the window, as though searching for someone, or escaping them. Days turned into a week. Clara stayed longer than planned, but Ethan adored her. The boy had lost his mother when he was only 3, and Clara's presence filled a gap David could never fill alone. The apartment felt different, less hollow. But David couldn't ignore reality. He was a single father struggling to keep his head above water. He couldn't afford another mouth to feed, no matter how kind she was. One evening, he sat Clara down. "You've been kind to us, Clara," he began carefully. "But I need to know. What's your story? Why are you here?" Clara's hands trembled as she clutched the blanket around her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a voice barely audible, she confessed, "My father, he's one of the wealthiest men in the city. But money doesn't mean love. I felt like a prisoner in my own house. No one saw me, no one cared, not for me at least, just for the fortune tied to my name. So, I ran away. I wanted to know what it was like to be human." David stared in shock. A millionaire's daughter, sleeping on his old couch, eating his instant noodles. It was unbelievable. Yet the fear and pain in her eyes were real. For the first time, David realized Clara wasn't just lost. She was broken. Clara slowly became part of their lives. She helped Ethan with homework, listened to his dreams of becoming an artist, and laughed at his silly jokes. To David, she became a quiet companion. Someone who understood struggle, even if hers was different. But hardship never stopped knocking on David's door. His boss at the construction site cut his hours. Bills piled up on the counter. One night, Ethan came home with a flyer. School was hosting a trip to the Science Museum. His eyes shone with hope. "Can I go, Dad? Please?" David's heart sank. The cost was small for some families, but for him, it was impossible. He forced a smile, telling Ethan they'd find a way. But alone in the kitchen, he buried his face in his hands. The weight of being a father, provider, and protector crushed him. Clara found him there. Quietly, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've carried so much on your own," she whispered. But you don't have to. She wanted to help, to pay for the trip, but David refused. You're a guest, Clara. You don't owe us anything. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, she said firmly. It's gratitude. You gave me shelter when I had none. You gave me something money could never buy, family. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. Yet, just when life seemed to find balance, reality came crashing in. One evening, black cars pulled up outside the building. Men in suits knocked on the door with cold authority. Clara froze, her face pale. "It's my father's men," she whispered. The truth could no longer stay hidden. Clara's father, Richard Monroe, was a man of immense wealth and power. He stormed into the apartment with anger masked as relief. "Clara! Do you have any idea what you've put us through? Running off like this? Living in a place like..." His eyes scanned the small apartment with disdain. "This..." David stood protectively beside her. "She's safe here. That's what matters." Richard sneered. "And who are you? A construction worker playing hero?" But Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling yet strong. "Dad, listen. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I felt loved, not for money, not for status, but for who I am. David and Ethan gave me that. Something you never did." The room fell silent. Richard's face hardened, but there was a flicker. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. In the days that followed, Richard tried to persuade Clara to return. Promises of luxury, comfort, and a life without hardship filled his speeches, but Clara shook her head. "If I go back, I lose myself. Here I found family, and no fortune in the world can replace that." Eventually, Richard relented, though not without conditions. He provided David with a better job opportunity, something stable, secure, with enough pay to give Ethan the childhood he deserved. He didn't do it out of kindness alone, but because he saw something in David's integrity that he couldn't ignore. Clara chose to stay close, visiting often, becoming the sister Ethan never had, and perhaps something more for David. Though love would bloom slowly, carefully, built not on wealth or appearances, but on trust. The story of that night, the night a poor single dad opened his door to a stranger, became the turning point of all their lives. Because kindness, even when it costs us, always returns in ways we can't imagine. Final message for the audience, dear viewers, remember this. We never know who we're opening the door for. Sometimes it's just a stranger in need, but sometimes it's the person who will change our lives forever. Kindness is never wasted, it creates ripples that reach farther than we can see. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Let's fill the world with kindness, one story, one act, one heart at a time.